Ficus Elastica, otherwise known as the rubber plant tree, is one of the most stunning trees that we can grow in the household. They come in abundant varieties, different colors, different variegations. This plant originated from the tropical rainforests of India and South America, and they are one of the most stunning plants. However, it can be so frustrating when the leaves start to go brown and crispy. So let's dive in today on reasons why Ficus Elastica, otherwise known as the rubber plant tree, why the leaves can go brown and crispy. The first reason is underwatering. Now this can be a few ways, there's a few ways of underwatering a Ficus Elastica. The Ficus Elastica is a pretty tough plant. The soil can become completely dry for a few days before watering the plant, but it cannot withstand a long period of drought. Also, inconsistently watering the plant can cause underwatering of the plant, which leads to the edges of the leaves turning brown and crispy. So the main sign of underwatering is that the leaves turn brown and crispy on the edges rather than the center of the leaf. Underwatering can occur from a few reasons. First of all, that not enough water is given to the plant, letting the soil dry for far too long before watering it. And what happens is if the soil is left for far too long before watering it or not giving enough water in the soil, the actual soil becomes hydrophobic, which means that instead of the soil absorbing water, it actually repels the water. So you might find that you're watering the plant, but the soil is actually not absorbing that water. The other reason is that the soil mixture may be too well draining, so it's not holding any moisture in the soil. And also the other part is that maybe the actual plant is too root bound. I mean, Ficus Elastica likes the roots to be slightly on the root bound side. They don't like to be in a pot that's too much soil in there. But the opposite is that they don't like being in a pot where there's actually virtually no soil in the pot. And what happens is that if a plant is too root bound, not only can this be causing underwatering of the plant, it can lead to the death of the plant because the plant is actually not being able to absorb nutrients either. And you can tell if a Ficus Elastica is root bound by just pulling the plant out of the pot and checking how much soil there is in the pot. Or if you're finding that the roots are coming out of the drainage hole, it's time to repot your Ficus Elastica. Now, what happened to this Ficus Elastica, which is my Ficus Elastica? Before I went on holidays, the actual soil was dry, and silly me, I forgot to water my plant before I went on holiday. So 2 weeks later, when I came back, I saw the edges of the leaves were already brown, and so that's when I watered my plant. And because it was left there in a drought sort of period for too long, fortunately the plant didn't die, but unfortunately it ended up with these edges of the leaves turning brown. Now, once the leaves turn brown, you can't do anything about it, because what happens is that there is no way of reversing the damage to the leaves. So the best thing to do is to avoid that sort of situation. Now, how often you water your Ficus Elastica, I can't actually tell you to have a schedule to water a Ficus Elastica because it depends on where you live in the world. It depends on the season. Is it summer? Is it spring where the plant will actually use more water? Is it winter or autumn where the plant uses less water? I don't know your soil mixture, the pot size, or the plant size. So the best thing to do is that before watering a Ficus Elastica, just check the level of moisture in the soil. If the soil is completely dry, you know it's time to water a Ficus Elastica. Now, the other reason is that you can have the opposite. You can actually overwater a Ficus Elastica. Now, this is more detrimental to a plant because this can kill a plant very quickly. And how to tell if a Ficus Elastica is overwatered is that the leaves tend to turn blackish, brownish but it's not really the edges of the leaves. It can be all over the leaves. It can be in the center of the leaves rather than the edges of the leaves. And overwatering is very detrimental because it can lead to root rot because there's bacteria growing in the soil which can damage the sensitive roots of a Ficus elastica, and this can actually lead to the death of a Ficus elastica very quickly. And overwatering can occur because the soil mixture is not well draining enough. So my soil mixture consists of 50% potting mix, 50% cacti soil. I mix it all up. I also put a handful of horticultural charcoal. Now horticultural charcoal, what it does is that it makes the soil mixture more well draining. Also, what it does is that the horticultural charcoal actually cleans the water that we place when watering our plants, and also it helps to kill the bacteria that can exist in the soil. So killing bacteria and making the actual soil more clean means that there's less bacteria that can affect the roots of a Ficus elastica. Overwatering can also occur if there's too much soil. So if the Ficus elastica is in a pot that's too big, there's too much soil, so absorbing too much water, which means that the soil is not, the water in the soil is not evaporating quickly, and so the soil is staying soggy or moist for far too long. The other reason is that the pot is too big for the plant size, or the other reason is that there's no drainage holes in the pots. So Ficus elastica is very important to place it in a pot that has drainage holes, because if you put it in a pot that has no drainage holes, whatever water you're giving the plant, it's staying there. There's no way of getting rid of the excess water. The other reason is that using a cover pot. So what I mean by a cover pot is that this Ficus elastica is in a nursery pot, a plastic nursery pot, and I popped it into a cover pot. Now, if I'm watering a Ficus elastica and I forget to actually empty out the water that is sitting at the bottom of the cover pot, then what can happen is that the Ficus elastica and the soil is still absorbing water, which can lead to overwatering the plant. So it's important to get rid of any of that excess water. The other part is that using things in soil like vermiculite can be a bit more detrimental to a Ficus elastica, because what vermiculite does is that it's a product to help with the drainage, but also vermiculite absorbs water as well. And so for myself anyway, I find a Ficus elastica doesn't like this product. I'd rather use something like horticultural charcoal. The other reason is that if you're finding browning of the leaves, especially on the lower part of the plant where the leaves tend to be older, that could be a natural process of the leaves just dying off. Because what happens is that, like any sort of plant, the leaves on the plant, the ones that tend to be on the bottom part of the stem of the plant, tends to be older leaves. And so naturally what happens to the leaves is that it's done its job, it's used the sun rays and converted the sun rays into energy through a process called photosynthesis, so the plant can actually use that energy to grow. And the leaves have done the job, it's getting older and it starts to go brown and die off. And that's a natural process of any sort of plant. However, if you see that the leaves are going brown and crispy on the top part of the plant where the newer leaves are, especially if it's not just one or two or three leaves, there's multiple leaves all once going brown and crispy, then it's definitely an issue with the leaves. And this is how you can tell if there's a problem with your plant. Because sometimes we think that, oh, the leaves have gone brown, there's a problem. But no, it really depends on where the browning of the leaves occurs. So it's at the bottom part of the plant, it's more like it's an older leaf and it's just natural process dying. If it's more the younger leaves at the top, there's definitely an issue going on. Now, if you're enjoying this content so far, how about your crazy plant lady and hit the likes button and subscribe to the channel so I can create more content for your viewing. How variegated is your Ficus Elastica? So what I'm talking about is the coloring of the leaves. Now, Ficus Elastica come in different colors. So there are ones that are not variegated, so they're pure green leaves. There's ones that are darker colors that are more like a burgundy color. There's ones that are variegated like this Ficus ruby and this Ficus tiniki, where the leaves have things like pink through it or creamy white and some green through it as well. The general rule is that the lighter the color of the leaves, the more likely that the lighter areas of the leaves can become brown because they are more susceptible to becoming damaged from the sun's rays. So plants have pigmentation in the leaves, and it's called chlorophyll, and this is actually used from the plant to actually produce energy, but also this gives the actual plant the greenish color that you see. So the less chlorophyll that's in the plant, the less pigmentation in the plant, the lighter the leaves tend to be. And what happens is that if there's not enough pigmentation in the area and the sun ray is actually beaming on the leaves, it means that the leaf can become scorched and end up becoming brown and crispy. It's just like humans. I mean, the lighter the skin a person has, the less pigmentation in the skin, so more likely that the skin of the person can burn compared to somebody with darker skin. And plants are just like that. Also, has the plant been acclimated to the sunlight? So Ficus Elastica are sun-loving plants, but it is important to adapt the plant to the level of sunlight. So what I mean is that if you're going to have a Ficus Elastica, it's being in the area where, say, it's only receiving the gentle, direct morning sunlight, and then it's all of a sudden moved to an area in the household where the actual sunlight is the afternoon harsh sunlight that's direct. It can be a lot more UV and a lot more harsh in the afternoon sunlight. And the plant is not used to that, so the leaves can burn very quickly. So it's best to actually adapt your Ficus Elastica slowly from a lower light situation to a higher light situation rather than putting it directly from one area to another area where it may not be able to adapt so quickly. So what I tend to do is that if I need to move my Ficus Elastica, and by the way, Ficus Elastica, they don't tend to like to be moved that often, so I would move it over a period of at least 4 months just to make sure my plant adapts quickly. So doing things like moving it from this area which receives direct morning sunlight, then to an area where it's receiving indirect afternoon sunlight. So I'm putting the plant probably about 2 to 3 meters away from a south-facing window, and then putting it into direct afternoon sunlight. But I'm doing this over a 3 or 4, actually more like a 4-month period, so that my Ficus Elastica can adapt to the higher light conditions. Also got to be careful with those artificial grow lights, because if the artificial grow light is too close to the leaves, this is very intense light and this can actually scorch and burn the leaves. Now, how do you know if a Ficus Elastica is getting sunburnt? Well, first of all, the first sign is that the coloring on the leaves tends to fade out. So the color is not as vibrant on the leaves. It tends to have this more like a slightly yellow color. And then if it's more severe, it will turn into a darker yellow color, or you can actually see that the leaf is completely burnt and dry and crispy. So that's sunburn on the actual leaves of a Ficus Elastica. The other reason why a Ficus Elastica, the leaves can go brown and crispy, especially on the tips of the leaves, and this is from the actual water becoming contaminated. So what I mean by that is that if we're using tap water has a lot of chemicals and can have heavy metals in it. Now, these chemicals and heavy metals can build up in the actual soil and lead to levels where it's so toxic that it's actually showing up on the leaves of the plant. So you tend to see this actual toxicity on the tips of the leaves of the plant. Rather than the edges of the leaves, it's more on the tips of the leaves. This can also occur from over-fertilizing your Ficus Elastica. Because what happens is that fertilizer has salts in it, especially liquid fertilizer. Now, if overwatering a Ficus Elastica, well, not overwatering, I mean over-fertilizing a Ficus Elastica, the salts in the fertilizer can build up in the soil, and this can lead to toxic conditions, and it will actually, what happens is that it damages the sensitive roots of the Ficus Elastica, and it'll show up in the tips of the leaves becoming brown and crispy. So Ficus Elastica, like any sort of plants, do need its nutrients, but I would recommend that you only fertilize your Ficus Elastica if you actually seeing it growing. So Ficus Elastica will tend to grow more in the warmer weather of summer and spring. However, you may be living in a part of the world where it's actually warm all the time and it's growing all during the year. So if that's the case, then yes, fertilize your Ficus Elastica all year, but use a half concentrated diluted solution of the liquid fertilizer. So whatever fertilizer that you use, just read the instructions, but halve it down so that you're actually not giving your Ficus Elastica the full dose. And the reason for that is that this helps avoid from over-fertilizing your plant. The other reason is that under-fertilizing your Ficus Elastica can also lead to brown leaves. Now, what happens with under-fertilizing, unlike over-fertilizing, you get the tips of the leaves becoming brown. Under-fertilizing, what happens is the leaves tend to look like this sickly yellow color. That's the only way I can really describe it. It's like it doesn't look well. The actual leaf is sick, it's yellow, it might be deformed as well. That's a lack of nutrients. And so if you do see this, then actually fertilize your plant. In this situation, you may want to consider giving your Ficus Elastica the full concentrated dose of the fertilizer, or the other option is that fertilize your plant more often with a half reduced concentration of the liquid fertilizer. The other reasons why a Ficus Elastica can end up with brown leaves is that, have you ever seen the leaf? There's kind of like these roundish, reddish sort of spots that are on the leaves. Now, this can be a sign of fungal disease, especially things like rust ring, or it can be a bacterial disease. And what happens is that the fungus or the bacteria can damage the leaves and end up with these little spots on the leaves. If you do see that, you can use a fungicide and spray all over the leaves there to help kill the actual fungus. The other reason why this can occur is that if the Ficus Elastica is in an area where there is not enough air circulation. So what happens is that the fungus spores can actually be in the environment, and because there's not enough air circulation, the actual moisture on the leaves can be there for too long, and this is more likely where the fungus is happy to grow on and end up with damaging the leaves. The other part is that if you're finding that you're seeing these little brown, but they're more like small brown raised spots, they don't look flat, they're more raised, then this is a sign of scales. And scales is a type of pest, and Ficus Elastica are very susceptible towards scales. And scales, they're pretty disgusting to look at, but they're relatively easy to get rid of. If you see this, then what I recommend you do is get a cloth, pop some alcohol on the cloth, and then scrub the leaves. So generally scales, you can see them a lot underneath the leaves because they tend to hide in those areas, or you can see on the stem of the leaves. And just use this cloth with the alcohol, scrub all those brownish bumps off, and repeat this treatment each week until you see that the actual scales have gone. And scales, unfortunately, yes, they leave marks on the leaves and they're not going to go away, but you want to get rid of these pests as quickly as possible because scales can actually kill a Ficus elastica. Also, the other part is that if you're finding that you are getting a lot of pests, and sometimes no matter what we do, we just can't get rid of it. I tend to avoid pesticides on my plants, and the reason for that is that I don't want to kill the beneficial plants that can occur, things like spiders, things like ladybugs, things like bees. I don't want to use pesticides in my household or around the home, and that's because I want to try my best to protect the environment around my home. So I avoid pesticides, and also pesticides, they can contain petroleum, which is, to me, is a really disgusting smell. And also using pesticides and using it the wrong way can actually also cause burning of the leaves. So I tend to avoid pesticides, but I find that if you cannot get rid of the scales or really any other household pests, things like mealybugs, things like aphids, things like spider mites. The other thing I tend to do is that if I see my Ficus elastica, I've done everything for it to try and get rid of these pests and it's still happening, I actually put it outside. The reason for that, in our environment, there are beneficial bugs that will kill scales and other pests. So sometimes I tend to get frustrated and I just don't know what else I can do for my Ficus elastica. I just pop it outside and let Mother Nature take care of it. Temperature changes, especially rapid temperature changes in the household, can also cause browning of the leaves. Now, Ficus elastica, they come from the tropical rainforest. If the temperature in the household, or if you're growing your Ficus elastica outside and the temperature drops below 55 Fahrenheit, which is equivalent to about 13 degrees Celsius, it's actually too cold for the Ficus elastica. So you're going to end up with these brown leaves. And Ficus elastica, they are tough plants, so they can probably still survive during those temperatures, but unfortunately the browning leaves are most likely to occur. So you want the household in an area where the temperature is above 55 Fahrenheit and above 13 degrees Celsius. Also, rapid temperature changes can occur. Sometimes it can be very hot, sometimes very cold. Now this can occur if a Ficus elastica is too close to drafty areas like doorways, like windows, especially at night time. If a Ficus elastica is too close to a window, the temperature can drop very quickly and the plant may not be able to adapt to it, and it will show up and will protest by you seeing browning leaves on the plant. Also, temperature drops can occur very quickly if the plant is near areas where there's heating, fireplaces, or air conditioning. Once again, this can change the temperature in that area very quickly and the plant may not be able to adapt. Now for myself, I haven't had any issues with Ficus elastica when it comes to humidity. Even though it's a tropical plant, I don't really think that Ficus elastica really cares about the moisture level in the environment, the humidity in the environment. I don't use a humidifier anymore in my household because I don't want to create a situation where mold can actually breed in the household. So I leave the Ficus elastica, whatever humidity it is, and I haven't had any issues with that. But if you have any issues with your Ficus Elastica and you know the reason and you want to share your experiences and how you solved your situation, I'd love to read about in the comment section down below. If you have any questions for me, feel free to pop a question or comment down below. I will get back to you. And if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to help your crazy plant lady by hitting the likes button, subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this content and you want to know how to take care of a Ficus lyrata, otherwise known as the fiddle leaf fig, then watch this video here. I'll see you next video.